Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
I came home earlier than usual and found my wife with someone I thought was a friend. The words she said changed my life forever. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy it! It was around 2 o'clock in the morning, and except for a few faint lights in the hallways, it was quite dark. I saw the silhouettes and shadows of what little could be seen in my 10 by 10 cell. With my arms crossed behind my head, I was lost in thought rather than sleeping as I should have been. My mind had a bad habit of returning to things I tried to forget but couldn't. Hearing footsteps, I began to count them, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then I saw him look at me. His face was hard and emotionless, like everyone else here. He was doing his job, making his nightly rounds, and was not interested in friendship. I didn't even know if he saw me looking back at him, but it didn't matter. He was outside, and I was inside. When he passed my cell, I stopped counting. There was no point. He wouldn't be back for another 92 minutes. Looking at the ceiling, I started planning again what I would do when I left here. 5 days and an awakening, and I would walk through these doors for the last time. I thought I would serve almost 7 months of my 1-year sentence. My job was waiting for me, but it was probably the only thing that would remain the same when I got out, and I knew it. My older brother fixed my car, looked after my house, and managed what little was left of my savings after legal fees. Was I still angry? Anger didn't even come close to describing the feelings I continued to feel, but those emotions were buried deep until I left here. I finally understood why guys who have served 10 to 20 years in prison turn out to be empty shells when they are released. All traces of humanity are left at the door when you get here. It's all a matter of survival, and this place is a damn resort compared to that place up north where they send hardened criminals. So I closed my eyes again and tried to sleep for the umpteenth time, hoping that this time I would be lucky and get a few hours of sleep. I dreamed of my old bedroom, the one with the blackout curtains. I knew this room, like everything else in my life, would never be the same. "I'll come pick you up next Tuesday," Brother Gary explained to me over the phone at the Prison Visitors Center during our last conversation. We looked at each other through the plexiglass wall separating us, hoping for the last time. "What do you want to eat on your first evening of freedom?" "Steak." "Large steak, medium rare," I said. Gary smiled at my request. "Steve, you are so simple. I thought you'd ask for something that would be harder to get past my wife. You'll live with Andy and me until you get back on your feet. I know that you have neither food nor furniture in the house. This will give you time to buy what you need. It won't be the Ritz-Carlton, but at least it will be clean, and you can come and go as you please." He smiled. I didn't. "I want to thank you," I started before he cut me off. "Forget it. We are family, and that's what family does for each other. And don't worry about Mom and Dad. I know they'll come to their senses when this all blows over. But we both knew it wouldn't happen soon, if ever. The emotions on both sides were too deep. Have you seen my children recently? The last time was about 2 weeks ago with Mom and Dad. Heather looks about the same, but John now has that stupid bowl cut that's all the rage right now. It's terrible, and I told him so. Do you know what that little idiot told me? He said that I was not his father and he didn't have to listen to me. I would have slapped him, but my mother was nearby. You'll have a lot of trouble with him, I knew. JN would never have dared to say such a thing if I had been around. Even though I was his father, he wouldn't live with me when I got out. He and his sister would be with their mother, at least for a while. Well, I had time, damn, I had all the time in the world once I got out of this hole. I'd wait for the right moment. I'm not in a hurry. Even though the divorce was already finalized, I still owned half the house. Kathy had to pay me about $65,000 to buy out my share. I knew that by then she had probably already cleaned out our safe deposit box and taken all our bonds and certificates. Luckily, I gave my lawyer a list of everything by serial number, so there won't be any questions about who owns what when I get out. And it will happen sooner rather than later. Katie and my ex-buddy Bob played a cruel joke on me, but that was in the past. The first time I was caught off guard and unprepared. This will never happen again, at least not in my lifetime. So I waited, reminisced, and looked forward to better days in the future when I would get out of this lousy place. Only then would I be able to restore what remains of my personal life and begin a new chapter, closing the old one. I hoped so. I hoped I could hold it all together until then. They were good, really good, in ways I had no idea about a few weeks before I even went to jail. Several of my supposed friends came up to me, saying they knew something was going on but didn't say anything. What the hell was everyone thinking? Did they think I knew about it and was okay with it? Each of these people should have known that I would never put up with this, but apparently, they did not want to interfere in other people's problems. Most had enough of their own. We had a great marriage for what I thought was 12 years, 2 children, a nice house, and a job that we could both be proud of. Of course, sometimes there were minor disagreements. What's a marriage without some rough edges? But I loved my wife to death and could never imagine what she was truly capable of. We didn't have many friends. We mostly talked to a few couples from our area. Most of them had been married for over 7 years and were around our age. All had at least 2 children, except Bob and his wife Connie. They had been trying to have a baby for ages, but nothing had worked. I guess Katie knew the real reason, but I tried not to interfere in their and other people's personal affairs. We were close, but I didn't want to be that close. One thing that eventually became obvious to everyone in our group was how much alcohol Connie started drinking. Since no one had to drive home, alcohol flowed freely at our parties, more than if anyone had driven. We all lived close enough that one of us could practically crawl home if we had to. Her drinking began about a year ago and gradually worsened. At first, Connie just became much more melancholic, but after a few months, it started to get a little ugly, and then downright ugly. Bob drank very little because he had his hands full caring for his wife. "Bob, honey, pour me another drink, okay?" she began from the beginning of the evening. By the end of the evening, she was telling him to get off his worthless and get her a damn drink. More than once, he had to practically carry her home because she was so drunk. I felt sorry for him, but it was his problem, not mine. Connie was in rare form today, I said, undressing and getting ready for bed. I think she passed out at least once. I'm guessing the main reason Greg and Judy left early was because Connie started taking off her clothes and asked Greg to help her. Nobody would let her get into that pool. I felt sorry for Bob the most, my wife replied, throwing her shorts and top onto the chair next to our bed. I know Connie is devastated that they can't have children, but the way she's taking it out on her husband is the wrong approach. I told her they could adopt, but she didn't listen. She just said that if her husband was more of a man, they wouldn't have such problems. Well, they'll either work it out or get a divorce, I told my wife. I know Bob won't put up with this anymore. You know, we all have to go out to dinner next week. I hope to hell she behaves, although I don't count on it. To some extent, I wish we hadn't gone, I said. I'll talk to her this week. Maybe she'll calm down for just one night. My wife tried to be optimistic. I can only hope so, she said. But Connie did not calm down. Waiter! Waiter! Connie shouted at everyone who passed by our table. How could a girl drink here? Huh, she mumbled, noticeably drunk. Then she began to attack Bob a second time. He was on the verge of exploding when I tried to defuse the situation. Come on, Connie, you promised me you'd dance today, remember? I said, placing her drink on the table and pulling her out onto the dance floor of the lounge. She started to refuse, but I was already up and not going to accept refusal. Because of her, we were close to being kicked out, and I did everything possible to somehow improve the situation. I walked her around the dance floor for 3 songs. I saw my wife talking to Bob, who looked terribly depressed. As we danced near the audience, Connie excused herself, saying she needed to go to the restroom. I walked her to the door of the women's restroom and gently let her inside. When she didn't come out after 5 minutes, I wondered what to do next. As 2 women started to come inside, I asked them to check on Connie. There was no good news. Is she wearing a bright yellow dress? Asked one of the women, sticking her head out of the door. When I nodded, she shook her head. She's unconscious in one of the booths. If you want, I'll wait for you to pick her up. I went in, lifted her up as best I could at the sink, and splashed cold water on her face. This helped for a second or two, but then her legs gave way again. I ended up practically carrying her back to our table. "Bob, let me help you get Connie into the car. She's unconscious, and I don't think she'll wake up anytime soon." I stood at the table, holding a drunken and dazed Connie. Bob couldn't hide his embarrassment and anger. "Steve, I can handle it. Sit down. I've got it all sorted out. It's not the first time, but it will definitely be the last." Despite his objections, I carried her outside while he grabbed Connie's bag and said goodbye to everyone. I laid Connie in the back seat and patted Bob on the back. "Sorry, dude. What else was there to say? Thanks for your help tonight. I'm at my limit and don't know what to do next. You both need to see a counselor. I'm sure neither you nor she will figure it out on your own. If you need moral support, just call Kathy and me. We'll help you as best we can." Even though it was mostly words, it sounded good. We couldn't solve their problems, and frankly, their problems were probably too big for anyone to solve. I gave them a couple of months, maximum. I wasn't mistaken, but no one expected the final outcome. It was around midnight on Thursday when we heard the sirens and went outside to see what was happening. I saw many bright lights at the end of our block. It seemed like the entire neighborhood was running down the street toward the incident. I shouted to Katie, "Stay here. I'll see what's going on." I ran to the scene with the others. This was not good. Everyone in the area watched as the fire brigade opened the driver's door of Bob's car. "What's happening? Is Bob okay?" I asked. "It's not Bob, it's Connie," someone said. They had an argument, and she grabbed Bob's keys and ran outside, got into the car. He tried to stop her, but she started the car and sped down the street. I saw that she had not gone far. My interlocutor continued to recount disturbing details. Connie crashed into a car parked on the street, reaching speeds of up to 40 miles per hour. I was about to ask how she was when the ambulance arrived. She was placed on a stretcher, bundled into the ambulance, and whisked away in less than 30 seconds. I saw Bob get into the car at the last moment. The show was over. Their front door was wide open, and the lights were on in the house. Apparently, Bob and Connie had a serious fight. Things were scattered all over the floor. I called Katie from Bob's phone and told her what happened. I locked up his house, leaving a note on the front door saying I had the keys to his house. "How is Connie?" my wife asked when I finally got home. "Badly. She wasn't wearing a seatbelt and swerved just before crashing into the back of someone's car. The police said she was traveling at about 35 miles per hour. Bob went to the hospital with her, so we can only wait. Don't you think we should go there, darling? He's going to have a lot on his plate tonight. We'll go there tomorrow when things calm down. We need to go to bed now. Tomorrow will come much faster than we'd like." We kissed goodnight but didn't sleep well because we were both thinking about Connie. Around 11 o'clock the next morning, my cell phone rang. "Steve, Connie is on life support," my wife screamed into her cell phone. "I'm leaving work now. Bob is terrified, and someone needs to be with him. Meet me there as soon as you can," she said excitedly before hanging up. Damn, the guy had no luck. I stopped at a nearby McDonald's to buy lunch for the three of us on the way to the hospital. I asked Katie's parents to pick up the children from our house after school. I walked quietly down the hallway to the waiting room where my wife and three others were consoling Bob. "How is she?" I asked. "Not good," my wife answered quietly. "The doctor took Bob into his office some time ago. He came out looking like a zombie and has said no more than 3 words since then." "I'm sorry," I said, sitting down next to him. "Are you okay?" It was stupid of me, I know, but I needed a conversation starter. "Steve, she's not going to get better," Bob said. "The doctor said she has almost no brain activity. I don't know what to do." He started crying into his hands. I motioned for everyone to move away and leave us alone. "Did anyone notify Connie's parents?" I asked. "They're on their way and should be here in a minute." "Steve, the hospital staff is asking me if Connie has a will and donor card." "I'm starting to think they're vultures circling," Bob said, looking at my wife. "The doctor dared to ask me if I would agree to turn off the machine." Damn, they're talking about my wife, he was now shouting, not paying attention to those listening. Why can't they just cure her? They're doctors. Why can't they just cure her? I didn't have an answer to his question. Connie's parents arrived a few minutes later, and the three of them entered her room. There was a lot of loud crying and cursing. I think her father was somehow trying to blame Bob for his daughter's condition. The attending physician went in, and after about 20 minutes, everyone came out. Her parents left with broken hearts, knowing they would never have the chance to speak to their daughter again. We left the hospital around 8 p.m. and stopped by Katie's parents to pick up the kids. God, I hope I never have to make that choice, I thought to myself. 48 hours later, when Bob, Connie's parents, and the doctor were in the room, they turned off the machine that was keeping her alive. She left quietly and peacefully. We tried to console Bob as best we could. Even though Connie had been obnoxious for the past year and a half, Bob truly loved her. At such moments, it is usually the good times that are remembered rather than the difficulties. There were a lot of people at the funeral, and there wasn't a dry eye. Even the men cried openly. Bob took this very hard, took a month off from work, and went to visit his family on the East Coast. I told him that we would take care of his house while he was away and not to worry about anything. I love you, you know that, don't you? I told my wife as I got ready for bed. It had been a grueling couple of weeks, and things were starting to return to normal. If I'm ever like Connie, just turn the damn machines off. I'd never want to be hooked up to a machine like that forever. Steve, don't even say that. It was a stupid mistake on her part. This will never happen to us. Bob returned a couple of weeks later, more or less himself. He asked Katie to help him sort through Connie's things and get rid of everything. I helped him take out his bedroom set when he bought a new one. It seemed that after 3 months, he began to come to terms with everything. Everyone tried their best to make sure he stayed involved and included in all social events. 2 of our neighbors even set him up with a few girls on blind dates, but nothing came of it. It was too early. So life went on, or so it seemed to me. When Bob regained the sparkle in his eyes 6 months later, I was happy for him. When I saw him start smiling and enjoying social events again, I breathed a sigh of relief that he had come out of that terrible depression he had been in for so long. He mixed with everyone. Finally, we had our old Bob back. Looking back, I probably should have noticed it, and maybe I did, but it never dawned on me. Katie and I were still happy together, but something was wrong. I just couldn't figure out what it was. We were as close as ever and made love with about the same frequency as before all this Connie and Bob nonsense. But I don't know, maybe it was just my imagination. However, a few months later, I asked Katie directly if there was anything bothering her. Nothing much, Steve. Why do you ask? I don't know. You seem a little preoccupied and distant lately, I responded, trying not to be confrontational. It's okay, she said, smiling. Intimacy? I thought to myself. She never called it intimacy, she always said making love. And why should I even think of asking for it? Stupid, stupid. I just smiled, gave her a kiss on the lips, and turned off my brain. I will never forget Friday, August 20th. That was the day my world collapsed. Katie called me at work to tell me that our kids were spending the weekend with her parents and asked what time I would be home. Honey, in that case, I'll try to get home a little earlier. Do you need me to buy something on the way? It won't be necessary. I just need to know what time you'll be home. That's all. Okay. A million thoughts were running through my head. Looking at my watch, I noticed that it was 3:30. Damn, another hour and a half before I can leave. I was thinking about all the fun we could have that weekend. I started to slow down and was driving home. No point in starting a great day off with a speeding ticket. However, I set a new record by driving home in just 28 minutes. I should have suspected something was wrong when I saw 2 cars in our driveway, but I didn't, because I recognized one of them as Bob's new car. Hey, honey, I'm home, I called as I walked in from the garage. Bob and Katie were standing in the kitchen. Hi, Bob, I greeted him. What's happening, Steve? Bob asked. I need to talk to you about something. Sit down. Katie was nervous, her voice was shaking, and she was constantly twisting her hands. Something was wrong. "I'll stand here," I told my wife, looking at both of them. "Steve, I wanted to tell you myself before you got the papers." "I'm confused." "Katie, what documents?" She took a step back. "Divorce papers." She barely uttered the words before choking up. "Katie, what the hell are you talking about? What are the divorce papers? I don't understand." Bob began to speak before I raised my hand to stop him. "Bob, stay out of this. This is between me and my wife." Then it dawned on me. I looked at her, then at him, and then back at her. "Bob, I think you should leave. And right now." He turned to the door. "Katie, we need to talk. And right now." "Steve, there's nothing to talk about. I'm in love with Bob." "Steve, I'm so sorry. You're a damn cheater. How long did you sleep with our good friend Bob? Was that before he drove Connie over the edge and killed her?" Bob stopped walking back and looked at me. He now had fire in his eyes. "Steve, you don't know anything." "Oh, I think I know. All this time I was trying to comfort you, you were sneaking around behind my back and sleeping with my wife. I should have ripped your head off, you piece of, well, you're not going to get away with this scot-free, do you hear?" They both stood together now, panicking, while I screamed and raged. "If you think I'm just going to roll over and let you both step on me, you're sorely mistaken. Both of you, get out of my house." I shouted. "Steve, this is my house too," Katie answered, recovering from her fright. "Not anymore. Cheaters have no place here, and you definitely fall into that category, don't you?" I could barely restrain myself from killing them both. "I'll leave as soon as I pack my things." "There's no way you'll leave right now if you know what's best for you," Katie said. "Let's leave," Bob said, waving her toward the door. "Listen to your new coward," I said, trying to provoke Bob into doing something. "Steve, I'll come back for my things when you've calmed down," Katie said. "By then, you will be dead and buried," I threatened with equal bitterness. They both retreated to the kitchen door, keeping their eyes on me. After that, I went crazy. 2 bottles of beer and a lot of destruction followed. Plates, our microwave, and 4 walls were partially or completely destroyed. Not bad for 2 hours of work. It took me 4 trips to remove all of Katie's things from her bedroom closet. I dumped it all on the front lawn and set the watering timer for 4 hours. I closed the doors, locked them, and put the security chains on them. Over the next 45 minutes, I heard a lot of screaming and yelling. This continued until the 6th bottle of beer, after which everything went quiet. I don't tolerate alcohol well, and 6 beers knocked me out until the next morning, which was probably for the best. As I went outside to get the morning paper, I saw that Katie had taken all her things. At least I wouldn't have to carry them onto the sidewalk, I thought, trying to smile at what I had done, but it wasn't helping. I was devastated, and the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I probably should have called my brother and parents to tell them what was going on, but I didn't. I wasn't sure who Katie had told, although I was pretty sure most people didn't know yet. However, after last night, I suspected that most of our neighbors now knew something was up. By the morning, I didn't care. When I called Katie's parents' house and tried to talk to the children, her mom wouldn't let me speak to them. "Steve, Katie picked them up last night," Fran said. "Katie was busy picking up her clothes from our front lawn last night. Let me talk to my kids." I screamed into the phone. She hung up. I called again, but she never picked up. I said to myself. I still wasn't thinking clearly, but enough to negate my losses by canceling all our credit cards. I informed the companies that they were stolen and asked them to cancel them immediately. I went to the ATM and withdrew all the cash the bank would allow from our savings and checking accounts. I figured I'd be there on Monday when the bank doors opened. With a couple of cups of coffee and a few pieces of toast inside, I planned my day, changed the code on the garage opener, changed the locks on all the doors, and take everything valuable outside and move it to my brother's house. I was about to leave when the doorbell rang. I almost opened the door, but at the last moment, I stopped. My hand was already on the handle. I looked through the peephole and saw someone with a large brown envelope. He waited a couple more minutes before leaving. Sooner or later, he will catch up with me, but not today, I told myself. I told my brother Gary and his wife Andy the highlights, or rather, the worst, of the night before. I asked him to keep the bag with his things away and not to say anything to anyone about it. He said he was sorry, and I agreed with him that Katie had turned into a stranger. Then I went to Home Depot. With 3 new sets of locks in hand, I headed home. I figured that installing the new locks would take no more than 2 hours. I was still on my street when I saw Bob's car in the driveway. He stood next to the open driver's door, looking at Katie as she loaded things into the back seat of his car. I probably should have driven past and waited for them to finish, but I was too angry for that. I rammed his car several times, but I didn't have time to do anything to him personally. Since the police mistook me for him, I was pushed onto the garage floor, handcuffed, and placed in a police car. Only then did Bob get out of his car. He was more than a little shocked and looked like he had seen a ghost. I wanted to stick my head out the window and tell him that next time I wouldn't miss, but I didn't have the chance. My wife was crying while talking to the police and looking at me. I smiled back at her. I was taken to the station, booked, and given 1 phone call. I called my brother Gary. Because it was the weekend, I had to spend 2 nights in jail before I could appear in court on Monday morning. My appearance before the judge lasted only about 3 minutes. I entered a plea of not guilty, and the judge set bail. It was already late in the day before Gary was able to settle the bail issues and get me out of jail. Steve, they're talking about attempted murder or at least assault with a deadly weapon. I know. I heard that at the first hearing before I pleaded not guilty. First of all, I need you to take me to the bank immediately. She's probably already emptied the accounts, but I need to know for sure. All the money in our savings and checking accounts was gone, but the bonds and certificates in our safe deposit box were untouched. However, a court order had already been issued prohibiting me from taking them. You could have at least left me $5 in the account. You really are, I told her when she answered her cell phone. I needed this money to live with the children until the rest was unlocked. What? Bob doesn't have enough money to support you all? I have a mortgage payment. Maybe I should just start a little fire in the living room, to keep warm. Steve, stop saying stupid things. I'm sorry about all this, but you're making everything harder than it needs to be. Why don't you just accept it and move on? I will move on as soon as you bring my children home. Steve, I can't do that, especially with your current condition. I don't think you'll hurt them, but I can't risk it. When this is all over, I'll let you see them as much as you want. Don't worry about the kids, but I can't say the same about you and your damn buddy Bob. I'm hanging up now, and this is the last time I'll talk to you. From now on, you'll have to communicate through my lawyer. Katie, you have no idea how much you and Bob will end up regretting this, I said. She hung up. When my trial date arrived a few weeks later, my lawyer argued for temporary insanity on my part. He claimed that after Katie told me about her relationship with Bob, I completely lost control. My actions were not premeditated but rather impulsive. Katie and Bob claimed that I had threatened them previously, and despite having a restraining order in place, they stated that they were still afraid for their lives, and with good reason. Mr. Bramore, the judge said, looking at Katie and Bob's statements, did you tell Mr. Kelly that if he didn't leave your house, he would leave in a body bag? I don't remember the exact words, Your Honor. It could have been something like that. But how would you feel if your friend slept with your wife behind your back? He was not impressed by my argument. My lawyer quietly scolded me, Steve, not a word. From now on, you don't remember anything you said or did. I'm trying to convince them that you didn't know what you were doing. What you say to the judge, like it being something like that, doesn't help your case. He was right. Chris, my boss and key defense witness, was completely supportive. He testified that I was a model employee and had never heard me use foul language, let alone see me lose my temper. After Chris's testimony, the case was closed. I could only wait for the judge's decision. He said he would make his decision within the next few days. When I returned to work the next day, my boss told me that he knew a couple of men who could make them both disappear if I wanted to. Thanks for the offer, but this is my problem, and I'm going to solve it on my own, I told him. On the way home, I wondered how much they could charge for such a job. 6 damn months and $122,000 later, I was screwed by my ex-wife in the system. The divorce was finalized, and she received half of everything. The house had to be sold, along with everything else of value. She stated in court that all her jewelry was missing and accused me of stealing it. I explained that all of mine were also missing, adding that she must have taken them on the day of the incident. At least I didn't have to pay any damages for this. The system had completed its work, the year in prison. Are they crazy? I shouted to my lawyer when I heard the judge's verdict. Steve, it could have been worse. You could have killed him, and then you would have been locked up for murder. Look, with good behavior, you'll be out in less than 8 months, and if you behave, it will be taken off your criminal record in 2 years instead of having a felony conviction for life. Serve your time, get out, and move on. It was easy for him to say. He wasn't the one who was going to spend 24 hours a day in prison. I appealed the decision, but after 3 months, I had made no progress. In less than a year, my life went from something wonderful to nothing. I owed this to Katie and Bob. Steve, your job will be waiting for you when you get out. Don't do anything stupid out there and look around, were Chris's only 2 pieces of advice, but they were good ones. After meeting my children for the last time on Sunday, I turned myself into court. I was placed in a local institution, and my sentence began. I checked everything online before going there and thought I knew the ins and outs, but looking online and actually being there are 2 completely different things. I asked my brother to put money into my prisoner account so that I could at least buy something, but I found that most of the goods were unnecessary garbage. Without a cell phone or computer, I wrote down my thoughts on a notepad and made bi-weekly phone calls to my brother, mom, and kids. I wanted to be aware of what was happening in the real world. Steve, my brother told me during one visit, I'll make sure your car is fixed before you get out. I know a guy who will do it for what insurance will pay if he can do it in his free time. However, I need to make sure that he does this before you leave. I also found someone to look after your lawn and noticed that you didn't have time to install new deadbolts, so I installed them. I told Kathy that if she wanted to come over, she had to give me 24 hours notice. The last time she was there, she took the rest of her and her children's things. She wanted to take their beds, but I said I would need to see a court order before she could remove the furniture from the house. She got a little angry but dropped the question. I was glad that my brother had my best interests at heart. Katie allowed my parents to see my children every other weekend. On Sundays, she became more and more irritable every time she said she was doing it out of politeness, because, as she put it, they were no longer part of her family. My mother told me that Katie began to denigrate not only me but my entire family. This became known because my mother found out from the children. Katie started calling me prison dad and told them that when I got out, she would have a serious conversation with me about what I could and couldn't do with them. She was a real idiot, but my parents agreed to everything she asked. I wanted them to tell her to shove sand and slam the door on her, but they didn't. They talked about keeping the lines of communication with her open. In less than 7 days, I contacted my lawyer to confirm my rights to see my children. I would have the right to see them every other weekend and for a full month during summer holidays, alternating each year. I informed my boss that I was leaving and told him that I needed a week to adapt and get everything right in my life. I'd never been happier to turn in my orange jumpsuit and put on my civilian clothes. Gary was waiting for me outside. We stopped at the first bar we came across. To freedom, I said, touching our bottles and drinking the first of 3 beers. Andy prepared a dinner fit for a king when we got home, steak dinner with all the trimmings, just as you asked. I think you can spend the first couple of nights with us until you get your things sorted out at home. The house is still for sale, but so far there have been no offers. Katie wanted to reduce the price, but this requires your consent. I smiled. The house still has all the furniture, but per your instructions, I threw out the bedroom set from the master bedroom. Dinner was great. I ate more than I had in the last 8 months. Unbuckling my belt and holding a glass of wine in my hand, I enjoyed the true taste of freedom, to do what I want, when I want. Not only did I move, but I also drank too much. I remember 5 or 6 bottles of beer and at least 3 glasses of wine. It was already 10 the next morning before I woke up, and another hour before I could get up and walk to the bathroom without falling. I went down the stairs to the kitchen. The note on the table said it all. If you're reading this, it means you survived last night. The coffee is made and everything you might need is in the refrigerator. The spare bathroom contains soap or razor, shaving lotion, a toothbrush, and toothpaste. If we need anything else, we'll buy it tonight when I get home from work. The keys to your car and house are on the rack by the back door. I hope I don't have to remind you not to do anything stupid. See you around 5:30. My brother probably knew me better than I thought. 2 mugs of coffee and an English muffin were all I could manage to swallow. After showering and shaving, I almost felt human. Gary had fresh clothes ready for me, and within an hour, I was on my way home. From the outside, the house looked the same. I must have sat in the newly repaired car for about 10 minutes before I got out. Memories, both good and bad, flooded my mind. I saw a new deadbolt and turned it with a key to enter. There was a mess inside. Things were scattered. It looked like someone had been in a hurry to get in and out. Pieces of clothing were scattered on the floor. The kitchen was half clean, and there was still food in the refrigerator that had been there for months. Leaning on the sink, I saw damage to the wall where my fist had tried to break through but had found the rafter. I rubbed my knuckles, remembering how I felt the night I walked in and found them waiting for me. I whispered to myself as I walked upstairs. The children's closets were empty, but there were a few memorabilia left that they either forgot or didn't have time to take. There was nothing left in my bedroom except my dresser and the clothes hanging in the closet. There were dark stains on the carpet where our bed and its triple dresser had been. This room will have to be completely redone before I set foot in it again. The rest of the house remained as I left it. It will need a good cleaning if I ever sell it, but I was in no hurry to sell the house. I had my own plans, and selling the house was not a priority. I sat down at the kitchen table and started making a list of things I needed to do. I could do most of the repairs myself if I wanted to, but at that point in my life, I just wanted it done. I folded the list, put it in my pocket, and headed to the bank. Not surprisingly, when I looked in the safe, she had already cleaned everything out. I needed written confirmation from the bank that she had collected everything. I was told that they had video footage of the safe area if I needed further confirmation. A call to my lawyer confirmed that she had taken everything, but what I didn't know was that he had already filed a petition in court to get everything back. It looks like we won the first round, as the court has already ordered Katie to return everything she took from the safe. My lawyer informed me of the latest news. Steve, she's offering to trade her share of the house for your share of the bonds and certificates. I told her to return everything as the court demanded or I'd have her arrested for disobeying a direct court order. She's crazy if she thinks I'm interested. My task is to legally represent you and only you, protecting your interests. That's why you hire a lawyer, I told myself. When I got home, I took inventory of what I still had. I knew a local contractor in the area and made a note to call him to fix the walls. I then called Mary Maids to do a full clean, especially in the kitchen and dining room, where I had thrown the microwave and smashed dishes against the wall. It was a shame because it was Grandma Kathy's good china. No one had turned off the power, phone, or water, so I figured I'd be able to move back in by the weekend once I bought a bed. I didn't need a full bedroom set but rather just a queen bed. It had been forever since I'd even bought a mattress, and now there were a million styles and types of materials, not to mention prices to choose from. Prices ranged from $500 on the low end to over $7,000 on the high end. I just needed something to sleep on. I picked out a nice box spring mattress and frame for just over $900. At least now I wouldn't have to worry about sleeping on a mattress that someone else had shared with my ex-wife. Hank, the contractor, came by Saturday morning to give me a quote. "Your walls are pretty strong. It must have hurt a lot when you hit that damn rod," he said with a small smile. Yeah, it wasn't pleasant, I admitted, shaking my head and remembering that moment. How about some renovations? Hank quickly assessed the damage. I think you have a few damaged areas on the walls and a couple of door frames that need replacing, but nothing too serious. I can start on Tuesday and probably finish in a couple of days. Sounds good. How much will it cost? I asked, preparing for the worst. Let's say $1,500. That includes materials and all the work. Hank wrote the number down on a piece of paper and handed it to me. It's agreed, Hank. I'll make payment after the work is completed. Is that okay? I clarified. Of course, Steve. I'll give you the bill as soon as I'm done, he replied, smiling. We shook hands, and he walked away, leaving me alone in my slowly recovering home. Left alone, I sat in the living room, contemplating my next move. I took out the list I had made earlier and revised it, adding new tasks such as buying new curtains and rugs to make the house cozier. I then took my phone and called Merry Maids to have them come the next day. I need a complete cleaning of the house, especially the kitchen and dining room. I need a deep clean, I explained. Of course, Mr. Pmore. We can be with you tomorrow at 10 o'clock if it's convenient, the representative replied. Great, see you tomorrow, I said, ending the conversation. I spent the rest of the day checking the electrical and plumbing to make sure all systems were functioning properly and began planning the garden makeover. I wanted everything to be perfect when I returned home. Ultimately, after so many months of chaos and struggle, I was yearning for some stability and comfort in my own space. Armed with a notepad and pen, I began sketching out a plan for the garden, imagining what new flower beds and perhaps a small vegetable garden might look like. All this time, I was thinking about my future, which, as I now had to decide, should be filled with peace and solitude after the turbulence of the past. Despite recent difficulties, I felt a surge of strength and optimism returning to everyday life in my home, where every room was a reminder of the past that made me appreciate how much I had overcome. It was a new stage, a new chapter that I was starting with a clean slate, literally and figuratively. In the evening, I went up to the second floor and looked into the rooms that would soon be filled with the laughter of my children during their visits. I was already looking forward to how I would teach them to plant flowers and how we would take care of the garden together. As soon as the sun set, I returned to the kitchen to make myself something to eat. The simple pleasure of cooking in my own kitchen was something I had been deprived of for far too long. As I prepared dinner, I reflected on the importance of appreciating those moments of peace and pleasure that I had previously taken for granted. After dinner, I relaxed in the living room, thinking about the days ahead. Although the path to this moment was littered with mistakes and losses, I felt confident that I could rebuild my life and find the happiness that seemed so far away just a few months ago. As the sun set, I walked out into the backyard to breathe in the fresh evening air and felt peace slowly begin to return to my life. The stars began to appear in the sky, and I thought that despite everything, I had found the strength not only to survive but also to be reborn. It was a moment of silence and reflection, and I realized that life always gives us a second chance. We just need to be able to see it and use it. I just want the holes fixed and everything painted white, nothing fancy, I told him. He made some notes while looking at the damage I had done to the four walls. How about $200? Too few, I said. Well, that's my price. Take it or leave it, Hank. I still have money left. I don't want to use our friendship, Steve. Whether you know it or not, you did me and all the guys in our area a big favor after your incident with Bob in the car. A lot of us started looking up to you. I don't know what I would have done if it had been me. It was my wife, but now all the wives in the area know their husbands won't stand for what your wife did to you. Damn, Randy and Linda had a big fight one night when she took Kathy's side. Randy told her if she thought so, she should pack her things and leave because he'd probably bury her in a grave if she did the same. Hank took a deep breath, pulled himself together, and continued, I'll say it again, you're our neighborhood hero. It made me smile a little, but he didn't know half of what it was like to be in my shoes. I thanked him and told him he could start whenever he wanted. With that, all the simple things on my list were completed. Within 6 weeks, all bonds and certificates were returned to our safe deposit box at the bank. The house was renovated and professionally cleaned. Life began to return to my new normal when my kids spent their first full weekend with me. We were all a little embarrassed. No one knew exactly what to say. Kids, I know it's going to be a little weird for now, but this is still your home. If you have something to say, say it. I don't want you to feel like you can't tell me what's on your mind for fear of hurting my feelings. My skin has become much thicker over the past year, and I don't think there's anything you could say that would shock me. I think they were a little relieved that I started the conversation. Dad, you know we both love you and we're sorry Mom did this, John said. Heather nodded in agreement. Dad, We didn't know about Bob until that weekend when Mom said we were going to live in his house. We didn't like it there and we don't like it there now. There was nothing you could do, it was your mom's choice. Even if Bob wasn't in the picture, your mom and I still wouldn't have gotten back together. What we had is over forever, and we'll all have to live with that. I just want you to know that I'm still your dad, that I love you, and if you ever need anything, I will always be here for you. We all hugged. Pizza and movies started and ended in the evening. Did I want to humiliate and blame their traitor mother? Oh yeah, but I wasn't going to stoop to her level just yet. Our first weekend was a blast by my standards. We started out cautious, but we ended up the way we always were, a family. However, in this new kind of family, we were together but apart. One thing I did for sure was to cut John's hair properly, no more bowl haircuts. Outside, life went on as usual. I went to work, hung out a little with friends in the area, and spent the rest of my time with the kids. When John started playing football and Heather started dancing, I started doing something else. Everyone except my brother told me to forget everything, move on, and start my life over. You're still young, you can find another girl, get married, and start a new life. I answered them, go to hell and your horse too. I spent 14 years on that, and if I want to be any more angry, I have every right to be. Talk is cheap, they didn't go through what I had to go through over the past 2 years. Sometimes you have to get your pound of flesh for the pain and suffering to go away, and I will do it one way or another. Katie wanted to reduce the price of the house, but I categorically refused. She was furious, but I didn't care. Steve, the house will never sell for that price in a down market. We need to lower the price by at least $20,000 to sell it. If you want to give up $20,000 of your share, I agree, and if not, then the price remains the same. Although I took my time, we eventually separated the bonds and certificates. She spent her share in less than 3 months on a new car and a vacation for herself and Bob. I put everything into the account. This was the beginning of my capital. 8.5 months after my release from prison, Bob's house caught fire. It was reported that while they were at a football game, someone poured gasoline on the inside of the electrical box in the back of the house and set it on fire. By the time the fire was extinguished, the back of the house was destroyed. Moreover, they had no electricity. The next day, 2 policemen came to my door. A trip to the police station led nowhere. You see, I was at a party in the neighboring area, and I had at least 10 witnesses to my alibi. Steve, you were only 1 block away. You could have easily walked over and done this, one of the officers accused. Prove it, was my only answer. I let them continue for a while, but when I got tired of it, I made my move. If you don't mind, I'll leave, I said, standing up. Mr. Truly Moore, we're not done with you yet, the larger of the 2 officers said. It looked like they were playing good cop and bad cop. Either arrest me or release me, or I'll call my lawyer because I'm not going to say anything more, I told them, pulling out my cell phone and looking at them. We're going to let you go, but we'll keep an eye on you, one of the officers said. I smiled to myself, mentally checking off 1 item on my to-do list, 1 done, 2 to go. I voluntarily took the children because they could not live in a house without electricity. Renovating Bob's house was going to take at least 2 months, so we took a mini vacation together. Steve, I know you did it despite what the police say, a suspicious Katie said as she picked up the kids for dinner one night. I don't know what you're talking about. I was with all our good friends, or rather, my good friends. It's a shame you and Bob aren't invited to these parties anymore. Maybe I could put in a good word for you, I suggested sarcastically, smiling inside. No need to worry, we wouldn't go even if they begged us, she answered, sounding bitter. What was that supposed to mean? Katie reacted with wide eyes. Nothing. I just wanted to say that you are so lucky to have each other. That's all. I smiled, and this time, not only inside. The children wanted to spend more and more time with me, which did not suit either Katie or Bob. More than once, I heard shouting between Bob and the children as they told him he was not their father and to stop acting like that. Kathy tried to intervene but ended up telling me not to incite the kids against Bob. Katie, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never said anything bad about you in front of the kids. You're their mother, and I've always told them they should listen and do what you ask. What about Bob? Him? That sneaky, nasty idiot. Besides, I think he's a pretty nice guy. If looks could kill, I'd already be dead. He treats your children well, and I don't want you to insult him any further in front of them. That's not going to happen. He's less than nothing to me, and I just pray I get to pee on his grave someday. After these words, she looked at me with that look again. It's not like I was going to do anything about it. Of course, Steve. So help me, she began to speak. What are you going to do, Katie? Cheat on me, divorce me, put me in jail, make my life hell? Oh wait, you've already done all that, haven't you? There's probably nothing more you can do to me. No, really. Better go back to that piece of shit you call my husband and leave me alone. Without another word, she turned around and went home. And to think that I once loved that, I said to myself as I watched her walk away. The work was going great. It didn't take me more than a couple of weeks to get into the swing of things. Once I got back, Chris encouraged me to take on 4 more accounts. It would take extra time, but without kids or anyone else at home, what else could I do in the evenings? After initial contacts with clients, I scheduled several 2-day trips to each facility to familiarize myself with their operations. 3 of the accounts were easy and would only add a little work to me in the long run, but the 4th, TWW Incorporated, was a completely different matter. They were in the process of changing their production process, and I had to go there once a month to keep up with all the changes. The engineer initially assigned to me left much to be desired. He was competent but very disorganized. I never got the data I needed, and when I started insisting on what I needed, he became a little arrogant. Chris, I don't want to cause trouble, but if I don't get what we need, we won't be able to make changes here, and it will end up screwing up their system. After 2 calls, they assigned me an intermediary between the engineer and me. From that day on, I dated a woman named Monica, who worked directly with the engineer. Steve, Monica Bradley, she introduced herself, holding out her hand for me to shake. She had a degree in process engineering but had only been with the company for about 5 years. We worked great together. Somehow, she got me everything I needed either with a hook or a crook. When we were about 2 weeks away from completing phase 1, I invited her to dinner. Monica, I would like to invite you and your husband to dinner tonight as a thank you for all your help, I told her. The Hilton where I'm staying has a great restaurant, so why don't you and your husband meet me there around 6 o'clock? We shook hands, and I left the plan at 4:30. I spent the next hour doing paperwork and email, with 50 emails piling up. I wondered what people did before the internet. 5 minutes before 6 o'clock, I went down the stairs and entered the restaurant. I was shown to a table and waited for Monica and her husband to arrive. At exactly 6 o'clock, Monica entered the restaurant alone. "Where's your husband?" I asked as I waved to her and stood up to greet her. "Steve, I'm not married." "Oh, sorry." "I was just guessing," I said, looking at the rings on her hand as I pulled out the chair for her. "I wear these rings to keep things professional at work. No one would harass a married woman and risk getting sued for harassment, so it makes everything a lot easier at work. Plus, for some reason, married people get promoted faster than single people. I think the reason is that married employees seem to be more stable." "How do you get by when it comes to corporate events and things like that?" I asked. "I just tell everyone that he's either on a business trip or something important has come up. I say it so often that they don't even ask anymore." "Well, you definitely tricked me," I said. We had a wonderful dinner, and by the end of the evening, I told her about my last 2 years. "I can't believe they did this to you." "It's terrible," Monica said. "Are you telling me it's in the past now and you're moving on with your life?" "Whatever it is. In fact, I tried to soften and rebuild my life, but revenge is still high on my list." "Damn, Steve, you're still young, and hundreds of women would love a guy like you," she said, smiling and blushing a little. "You're probably right, but I haven't had the time or inclination to get back into the dating pool. I'm still a little wary." "But you asked me out on a date, didn't you?" "You and your husband," I interjected. "Well, if I weren't married, would you still invite me?" "You know, I'd probably invite you. You're easygoing and pleasant to be around, and most importantly, you're not a pathetic idiot like my ex." "I'll take that as a compliment," she said, laughing. The rest of the dinner went great. The next day, I left and did not return for almost a month. I told her to call me once a week, especially if something happened. I began to feel more relaxed around women, even those outside of my inner circle. We met almost every night when I got there, which turned out to be every couple of weeks. I still had a lot of trust issues, but I was working on them. Phone calls and emails kept us in touch. "Steve, let's plan the whole evening for Thursday," she said, kissing me at the door. I took out a city map and looked for a restaurant I hadn't been to yet. After 6 attempts, I had visited all the local establishments, so tonight I went on an exploration mission, as I like to call it. I found a good Indian restaurant about 25 minutes from where I live. I sat down in a corner booth, ordered a beer and a full tasting tray, and was ready to relax. I didn't see them enter, but I heard a familiar laugh right after the food was brought to me. I changed seats in the booth and regretted it. There was Monica and some guy at a table only 20 feet away from me. From the looks of it, this wasn't their first date. They talked, laughed, held hands, and did not take their eyes off each other. After 5 minutes of watching them, I lost my appetite. I finished my beer, paid, and left. She didn't seem to have any conflict on Thursday. I tried to stay away from her instead of eating in a restaurant. I went alone to McDonald's. By 3 o'clock, Monica began to become my shadow. She smiled and flirted. "Did you resolve your conflict last night?" I asked. "I thought you might be interested in a quiet and cozy restaurant I found last night. They have a great tasting tray." I looked her straight in the eyes. "What kind of cuisine is there?" "Indian." Her face turned pale. "I was there last night. And guess what? On the other side of town, in a restaurant, I saw a person I knew." "What are the chances?" "Monica, I can explain." "No need. I probably should have realized what kind of girl you were that first night at the restaurant. I got rid of one liar, and I definitely don't need another." I left, cutting my trip short that month. After not responding to 4 emails, there were no more trust issues that continued to plague me. I thought I had started to overcome them, but for my next trip, they assigned me another person, fortunately a man. 3 months later, I received an early Christmas present. Bob's office parking lot was across the street from his building. At the corner, there was a traffic light with a pedestrian crossing and a signal. It was a Friday evening around 5:10. Bob was in a hurry to get home, and as soon as the pedestrian crossing light turned green, he began to cross the street. He did not notice the car that ran the red light on the left. It happened so quickly that the closest people did not have time to warn him. Neither of the 2 women who witnessed the collision could clearly see the car, much less the license plate. All they said was that it was black, a 4-door car with tinted windows, which matched my black BMW. I was talking to a neighbor on a Saturday evening when a police car pulled into my driveway. 2 policemen got out of the car and approached where we were talking. "Mr. Moore, we'd like to talk to you," one of them said. "Sure, no problem, Tom. I'll get back to you later about the party," I told my neighbor, Tom, who slowly walked back towards his house, watching us as he walked. "Mr. Judah Moore, you have a 2002 BMW 320i, black in color," another officer said, reading from a clipboard. "That's right," I replied, wondering what all the fuss was about. "What's the matter? Did I forget to pay for parking or something?" I joked, but they didn't laugh. "Is the car here?" "Yes, in the garage." "What is this all about?" I asked. "Sir, we would like to look at the car now." My 2002 car was no longer new. Although it had been repaired since the night I crashed into Bob's car, it still had quite a few dents and scratches. But it was paid for and still drove great. One of the policemen returned to his car to get a camera, and I went into the house and pressed the button to open the garage. They walked to the front right side of the car and began taking photographs. "Can you tell me how these scratches and marks on the bumper appeared?" one of the officers asked. "I have no idea, to be honest. I bought this car new, and after 8 years, it probably has a few chips and scratches on it. Now that I've answered all your questions, maybe you can answer one of mine. What's going on and how is this related to my car?" Mr. Moore, there was a hit-and-run accident yesterday afternoon, and witnesses said it was a black sedan with dark windows matching the description of your car. And like a million others in this city, I replied, starting to get irritated. Why me? Does my license plate match that car, or did someone recognize me as the driver? 2 witnesses only saw the car. As you can see, there is no major damage to the front end, and I can confirm my location from 8 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening yesterday. Why did you choose me? Your history with this man and your threats are the reason for this visit. We'll go now. Thank you for your cooperation. Wait a minute. I shouted as they began to walk back to their car. Who do you think I hit? Mr. Robert Kelly, one of the officers said. I started to smile. He died? No, sir, but he is in critical condition. They stopped for a minute and then continued walking to their car. I waved goodbye to them, went into the house, and opened a bottle of wine. I ordered pizza and ate almost all of it, but I drank the entire bottle of wine to celebrate the occasion. The neighbors were full of gossip about Bob. This guy just can't catch a break, some said, while others declared he got what he deserved. I was over the moon. 2 days later, Bob's condition worsened and he died. I looked good, a new suit, fresh haircut, and polished shoes completed my look. I even stopped to wash and wax my car on the way there. It was not crowded, but many people gathered outside the funeral hall. When I arrived, everyone who was talking suddenly fell silent and watched as I walked up and entered. I didn't sign the book, I just walked quickly down the main aisle. Katie looked up and saw me. I chuckled to myself at the shock on her face upon seeing me. My 2 children sat next to her and smiled at me. It only took about 15 seconds for Katie to stand up and try to stop me from reaching the open casket, but she failed. Another grin to myself. From the moment I started walking down the aisle, I was smiling, and by the time I reached the casket, I had a huge smile on my face. Katie screamed at me, crying the whole time and calling me every name in the book. This time, there was a grin on my face. 2 done, 1 left, I told her. It stopped her in her tracks. She was still crying, but now there was fear in her eyes. I warned you, I said quietly, and walked out of the now quiet funeral hall. I was interrogated twice more over the next month. Kathy insisted that even if it wasn't my car, it didn't mean I wasn't involved. The driver was never caught, and after a few months, it became old news. When the police car pulled into my driveway, I expected it. When they told me they were taking me to the police station, I wasn't even surprised. I locked my house and looked at my neighbors as they watched me being put in the back of a police car. Mr. Moore, do you know David Kent? One of the 2 detectives asked, handing me a photograph. Of course, I replied. How do you know him? I hired him to spy on my ex-wife, I said matter-of-factly. He followed her on and off for about a month. I pushed the photo back to the detectives. Why did you hire Mr. Kent to spy on your ex-wife? The detective asked. My ex-wife seems to be inviting trouble ever since she got involved with her now-deceased husband. Since my children live with her, I felt it was my duty to make sure they were okay. So I hired David to keep an eye on them, mostly at night, to make sure my children are safe. Well, your ex-wife told us that she thought she was being followed and watched. She saw your Mr. Kent several times and called us. When we apprehended him, imagine our surprise when it turned out that you hired him, the officer said, sounding rather sarcastic. Mr. Moore, this is very close to stalking, and you could still be charged if this continues. I was just concerned about the safety of my children, that's all. I couldn't care less if something happened to my ex, but my 2 children are a different matter. If that's an issue, then I'll rely on your management to make sure my children remain safe. Mr. Moore, what you're doing isn't illegal, but it's pushing the limits. Why don't you just talk to your ex and try to work things out? The last time I tried this, I ended up in jail. They let me go, but for the 3rd time, they said they would keep an eye on me. They really need to come up with something new. I didn't pay David to be invisible, I wanted Katie to see him. The next person I hired was even less stealthy and looked much more menacing, like someone out of a Hell's Angels movie. It cost me $30 an hour and he only worked for 3 hours every 4th night, but I got the effect I wanted. See, I wanted to try to make my ex have a nervous breakdown. I thought if she had a nervous breakdown, I'd get the kids full time. We were a family, me and the children, but I wanted to give back what was taken from me. Steve, what the hell do you want? A frustrated Katie screamed into the phone. I want you to die. That's what I want, I said. Katie was so shocked that she immediately hung up. I waited on the porch. You're late, I said to the 2 police officers as they arrived at my door. Katie accused me of threatening her life, but this time I already contacted my lawyer. He was waiting for us at the station when we arrived. My client did not threaten the life of his ex-wife, my lawyer told the police. He simply expressed his desire to see her dead, without saying that he was going to do it. Well, she took it as a threat to her life and was concerned because she was still being followed by people hired by your client. Look, it's not illegal to follow someone, and if you don't have a recording of Mr. Moore saying he's going to kill Mrs. Kelly, you don't have a case. And you know it. Mr. Moore, why don't you just move on? People break up every day. It's a shame you had to go to jail, but I understand those charges have already been cleared from your record. You're driving her crazy, and if it breaks and someone gets hurt, we will come for you. He didn't smile. Is there a way to end this? I consulted my lawyer. All my client wants is for his children to come home to him. If Mrs. Kelly gives up custody, he will cease all actions 100%. We can't say anything about this. It's up to the court to decide. You asked, and we answered. So if nothing else, my client and I will leave. And that's exactly what we did. I was having breakfast and reading the newspaper on the terrace that next Sunday morning when I heard the front doorbell ring. I had no idea who could have come to see me so early. I opened the door, and Kat's parents were standing there. Steve, can we talk to you? Of course, come in, I said, greeting them. They were dressed in their Sunday best. I assumed they were either returning from church or on their way there. Can I offer you a cup of coffee? No thanks for the offer. What brings you here? I asked. Katie's father got straight to the point. Steve, I'll get straight to the point. I know our daughter treated you unfairly, especially since you had to go to jail and all, but she's our only daughter, and we don't want anything to happen to her, if you know what I mean. Look, I'm not going to send her to her grave, no matter what she thinks. She made some bad choices and now she's paying for it. All I want is my kids. They'll be better off with me, especially considering that she's having a series of bad luck. I wouldn't want anything to happen to them if something happens to her, if you know what I'm saying. They just looked at me, not knowing what to say next. Steve, we'll talk to her, but you know how she is, Katie's mother said, trying to overcome the awkwardness caused by my last remark. That's where you are wrong. The woman I married many years ago would never have cheated on her husband and left him to his fate. I don't recognize who she has become, other than the mother of my children. I would like to see her suffer a painful and miserable death. You see, I don't forgive and I definitely don't forget. With these words, they hurried away. I think I made my point. On Thursday evening, I finally received the visitor I had been waiting for all these months. It was already about 7 o'clock and starting to get dark. She must have been walking because I didn't hear the car pull up. She rang the bell. I looked through the peephole and let her in. She was already angry when she walked through the door. I half expected a phone call, but it was even better to see her here in the flesh. Come in, Katie. Would you like something to drink? Acid hemlock tincture with ice? I said, closing the door behind her. Very funny. You really aren't. I opened the door for her again. I think we're done. It was nice to see you. By the way, live a short and unhappy life, okay? I said, still holding the door open as she looked at me. I'm not going anywhere until we discuss this. She carefully sat down on one of the chairs in the living room. As you wish. I closed the door and went to the kitchen for a glass of wine. So, what brings you to my humble abode? Our humble abode, remember? I still own 50% of this house, despite the fact that I paid off the loan after the divorce, I reminded her. Well, I want this house to sell. What will it take for you to agree to lower the price? A miracle or your agreement to cover losses and interest. Done. Organize it, she tossed back to me. I just want you to get out of this area and leave me alone. That, dear Katie, will never happen. Do you still hate me that much? More than you can imagine. It was shitty how it happened, but I never planned on getting involved with Bob. It just happened. She shouldn't have thought that I was so stupid and naive. Katie, nothing just happens. If he didn't hold you at gunpoint, you did it willingly. Was he so much better in bed that you ruined our marriage and our family? My anger flared again. It wasn't because of intimacy, it was because he needed me. He didn't have anyone, and I guess we just fell in love because we both ended up needing each other. Were you doing social work? I needed you, our kids, our marriage. But you're saying your wet rag needed you more? Now he's underground and significantly less needy, I said, smiling as I enjoyed every bit of the memory. I only wish I had driven the car that ended his miserable existence. Steve, you've really become a cruel person, haven't you? Being happy about someone's misfortune? It really hurts. I wish I could say it was all my fault, but you and that guy had a lot to do with it. Darling, it's a cop-out, and you know it. 60% of marriages fail today, and do you think that each divorced spouse goes around hating the other? I don't care much about other people's marriages, I only care about my own. How long have I been a stupid, gullible husband? Does it matter? I asked. For me, it does. 2 months, 3, 5, about 5 months, if that matters. It was the first time it happened, and I almost told you about it that night. I was so upset, she said calmly, as if rehearsed. But you didn't, and I guess you weren't that upset because it happened over and over again. How many times have you slept with him in our damn bed? Never. I would never do that to you, she said angrily. I guess it was okay for you to sleep with him wherever you could, right? You know, a lot of our friends saw what was going on, but no one had the courage to tell me. It just goes to show that some people can't be trusted. You've definitely proven that you can't be relied upon. So where do we go from here? This house is our last connection to each other. What about the children? I won't give them away, and nothing will make me change my mind. My thoughts were racing 1,000 miles an hour. Katie, I won't even try to convince you. You got full custody because of what you made me do. If I hadn't been crazy about Bob and his car that day, I would have had 50-50ths. Bob got what he deserved, and now it's just the two of us. Her eyes widened. Steve, are you threatening me? Am I depriving the children of their natural mother? I said with a mix of sarcasm and poison. I would never do that, but if something happens, like if you get a heart attack, or get struck by lightning, or get into an accident, I just want you to know that I will take care of it so that the children always remember you. And if you have any last wishes, I would not put them off on paper because you never know when something might happen. I hope this would have the same impact as the line in the movie where the killer told his victim to get his affairs in order. I have to go, Katie said, standing up. We had 12 good years. In a way, I'm sorry it ended like this. She tried to kiss me on the cheek, but I pushed her away with both hands, almost knocking her off her feet. Don't ever try to touch me again. This took her by surprise. What did you think? That you and I are okay with each other now? You're giving me chills. My eyes were burning. Sorry, she said, confused, her eyes wide with horror. Don't apologize because I don't care. She left the house and headed towards the road. By the way, you know that look you just gave me? Bob had the exact same look right before the car hit him that night. I wish I had a camera, I would have shown you. I closed the door but left it. Her name is Ellen, and she works for the State Department of Corrections. I had to report to her regularly for the first year after my release, just to make sure I'm adapting, rehabilitated, and okay. Ellen is tough and doesn't take any nonsense. After we finished with the formalities, we started talking and found out that we might have feelings for each other. Ellen couldn't ethically date me until my probation year was over, but we were eventually able to go on a real date. I admitted to her that I have serious trust issues, and she one-upped me by saying that most prisoners, to one degree or another, lie to her. Now we're both trying to move forward while dealing with our trust issues and getting to know each other better. Ellen made me reflect on what I've been doing since my wife left. She showed me that my actions were preventing me from having a real life and forming meaningful relationships. She said it was time to move on. She convinced me even more when she told me that if I messed up again and ended up in jail, mine would be hers, and she could do whatever she wanted to me. Darling, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, she explained, smiling in a way that raised the hairs on the back of my neck. And guess what? I believe her. I really do. When I'm with her, she makes everything interesting because, as much as I think I'm cool, Ellen is someone I would never dare mess with. What's more, I know in my heart that she would never go against me either. This moment was a turning point in my life, opening my eyes to how far betrayal can go. Never let betrayal or deceit destroy your dignity and peace of mind. Life is too short to waste it on those who don't value your trust. Remember, you deserve more respect, love, and honesty. Take care of your heart and don't be afraid to start fresh. Thank you for being with us. See you in the next video.